Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani. I am the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement for the Muslim community. Today, we're joined by two esteemed guests, Imam Walid Basyouni of Clear Lake Islamic Center and also the vice president of Al Maghrib Institute. And we have Dr. Tom Oliverson, who is second term, I believe, right? Second term with the State House of Representatives for the great and wonderful state of Texas, our home. And he also just happens to be with the Republican Party, which is something that we're going to be talking about a little bit more, because most people feel that that the Muslim community really strongly aligns with the Democratic Party, or some would say we align directly with the Republican Party. But as something that we've always said is that the Muslim community really runs socially conservative, politically liberal. And as Imam Walid has alluded to earlier, we're also pretty fiscally conservative, especially because so many of us are business owners or participate in entrepreneurship. So this is just the start of many conversations. And, before we begin, I'd like to do a couple of introductions. Imam Walid, could you start us off with your introduction?
Sure. My name is Walid Basyouni, and I'm the Imam of Clear Lake Islamic Center here in Houston, Texas. I hold an PhD in Islamic Studies and philosophy. I did a lot of studies of my life in comparative religions and modern groups and sects, as well as I'm the vice president of an international organization based here in Texas called Al Maghrib Institute, where we offer weekend seminars and online seminars. And for the last decade, we were able to taught over 150,000 students worldwide. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the Minaret Foundation for having me, and for Tom to be in this conversation.
Thank you, Imam Walid. Representative Tom.
Yeah, hi, my name is Tom Oliverson. I am a second-term House member in the Texas House of Representatives, serving District 130, which is the Tomball, Cypress, Hockley, Waller area. So it's sort of that far northwest corner of Harris County on your way to Austin, where the Outlet Mall is, for those of you that might be heading up 290 that way. That's in my area. I am a physician by trade. I am an anesthesiologist. I am a managing partner with U.S. Anesthesia Partners, which is the largest anesthesia group in the state of Texas. And I think we cover most of the hospitals that many of the folks listening to would probably be familiar with. And so that is my background. I serve as the vice chair of the House Insurance Committee. I am also on the Calendars Committee and the Natural Resources Committee. I was actually, for my work on pharmaceutical price transparency, I was actually selected this last session as one of the 10 best legislators in Texas by Texas Monthly. And so I really enjoy working on healthcare policy issues, looking for ways to expand the marketplace and bring costs down for everybody. I'm obviously a fiscal, social, conservative guy. I am a Baptist, Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher and former deacon. So obviously I've spent a lot of time studying the Word as well. And I'm really excited to take part in this conversation today.
So let me get this: state representative, physician, and Sunday school teacher?
Yes, sir. That's right.
And father as well.
Father of 3 wonderful children. Yes. So yeah, man of many hats.
Excellent. And today we're here because, elected officials are charged with making the best decisions for their constituents. And sometimes those decisions aren't easy and may come with unintended consequences, whether it be the economy, criminal justice, education, or healthcare. Each decision elected officials such as Tom make has the potential of impacting tens of thousands of lives with immediate effect. Today we have Representative Tom Oliverson. We're supposed to be joined by Representative Gates as well and Sheriff Nels, but Sheriff Nels is running a tight primary right now, and he sends his regrets. And Representative Gary really got caught up in this crazy weather pattern. We hope to have them on at a later time, probably after primaries are over. But just to kick things off, religion and politics, we've always been told don't mix, and this is just the way that I've grown up. We don't bring religion and politics at the dinner table. We don't talk about it at work, and we know about the separation of church and state, and it's taught to us over and over again. So religion and politics don't mix, or do they? How does your faith impact the decisions you make?
Well, I would tell you, I think that they certainly do mix. I can tell you in my own personal experience, I didn't become a state representative because that was something that I always wanted to do. I became a state representative because I felt that that was God calling me to serve. And it's one of these things that you encounter in your life when God is moving you in a certain direction, you get these subtle taps on the shoulder, pushes that become a little bit stronger until the next thing you know, you're sort of standing in front of the doorway and it's open. And the question is whether or not you're going to walk through. And so I took that leap of faith and said, okay, I've never done this before. I never really thought about doing this, but I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to go out there and serve my community. And I'm going to see this as a mission field type calling from God. And I feel like, I have been effective in serving the citizens of my district, but also in terms of staying true to what it is I know and believe and see as sort of my worldview as a born again Christian. So I think they do. And quite frankly, if I could just say one more thing, I would tell you that I think at this point in our country, anybody who doesn't think that religion and the ability to practice religion freely is an issue that is not being hotly debated in state houses and even in the halls of Congress, with its very future potentially of the First Amendment being in question, the ability to, peaceably practice your religious beliefs. You haven't been paying attention because that is very much in the dialogue right now. We have people saying things like, if you don't agree to do what we want you to, we'll take away your tax exempt status as a religious organization. We have people calling for, statues to be torn down of religious figures and religious leaders. It's all over the place. And I would go back to one other thing I would just point out. And my personal understanding of the separation of church and state is simply what you see in the First Amendment. And it's essentially the idea that government can't come into your house of worship and tell you what to worship or how to worship or what to believe. It is an anti-establishment clause. There was never a prohibition on you taking your faith out into the community and sharing it with others, regardless of whether people felt that it was offensive to them personally or whatnot. You have that right. And I will absolutely fight with my every last ounce of being to continue to protect that right for religious people to go out and practice their faith in public.
Yeah. Imam Walid, we were supposed to do a Masjid Civic Day at Clear Lake Islamic Center when COVID hit. And the whole theme of the Masjid Civic Day at Clear Lake Islamic Center was religious freedom. What are your thoughts on what Tom just spoke about?
I agree. Those who believe that politics and religion don't mix understand neither. Just especially here in our country, if we look, 4th of July is coming very soon. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is a well-known phrase in the United States Declaration of Independence. The phrase actually gives us 3 examples of the unalienable rights, which the Declaration says that they are given to us by our Lord, which the governments are created to protect. So that's just right there shows you the relationship between religion and politics. I don't think we can separate these two from each other. But what I would like to say, and this is something I also believe in, if I want to kind of rephrase that or a little bit dig deeper in it, I do believe that it is a healthy thing to keep politics out of religion. Because unfortunately, we think religion can fix politics, but the reality is politics and politicians can corrupt religion. It's not the other way around most of the time. But I do believe that policies that is made, it should be inspired by faith and higher morality ground. I do believe that politicians who uh, fear God before men, those who think about what is their principle before their party principles, are people that I trust to lead. There is a very great leader in our history as Muslims, very well known. His name is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. He was a great king or president, or whatever you want to name him. Um, and this man, when he just was, and literally he was elected actually by the people to be the leader, he said something very interesting. He said to one of his advisors, he said, "I'm afraid. You know, after taking this big responsibility, I have fear in my heart. Would I be able to fulfill that responsibility?" Then his advisor said something very interesting. He said, "If you have fear, I'm not worried about you. I'll be worried if you're not afraid." You know, and that shows you that those who God conscious are people that I trust. So I do believe that we should respect religion. The government there to protect the freedom of religion. The government there to facilitate a place where people can worship their God freely. Uh, I think that the challenge will be that we should not let one set of rules and one particular religion prevent the rest of us to enjoy the freedom of the religion. And that's something I think we've been demonstrating very beautifully here in America. I travel the world, Muslim and non-Muslim countries, and I can say that America by far is a very leading example. We're not a perfect nation, but I love the fact that we are one nation under God. And I think Reagan is the one who said, if we're not one nation under the God, we'll be a nation under, you know, which is no one wants.
Yeah,
You know, Tom, when you and I were together at your office, you had mentioned several decisions you had to make in the house, and you had spoken about how you consult you consult God and you consult Him through prayer every morning before you make these decisions. And really, recently, it reminded me of Judge KP George in Fort Bend County, where he said that before he makes any decision, he always prays to Christ and asks for assistance and help through God. Before he makes these decisions. And it's the same conversation that I had with D.A. Middleton as well, that faith takes a big role in the types of decisions that are made. But here's a question for you, because as a representative of the people, your governance includes people who are of faith and people who are of no faith and people who outright reject faith. What's the balance between, and I don't want to use the word inject, but what's the balance between utilizing your faith tradition as a Christian, as a devout Christian, and balancing that with policies that govern all?
Well, that's a great question. I think the foremost thing is going back to what Imam Walid said. I think we have to understand that America is that shining city on a hill because we have freedom, we have tolerance of different faiths, and we have the opportunity to be able to share our faith with others. And that is the single most important thing, I think, when you look at the United States of America and you go back to what it was founded on and how it was founded. That's an absolutely brilliant, treasured idea that I think can only have come from God. This idea that, you know, we are going to be a free and open marketplace of ideas, and that includes religious ideas. There's no America, in my opinion, we lose sight of America when we say that we're going to be a country that is essentially a theocracy one way or another. And that is not who we are. We are a democracy. We are a marketplace of ideas in terms of a society. So when I look at policies and things like that, I just try to keep in mind that, you know, I'm looking at things through my lens and looking at things as a Christian. But really, I think the most important thing is the policies and the ideas. We just have to keep those opportunities for people to believe what they choose to believe open. I am not in the business of telling people what they must believe and how to do it. And I don't think any of us want to be in that position. And I think that's the greatest thing about our country is that, you know, that is not what we were founded on. That's one of the things I see as a potential threat to our religious freedom is that there is this growing intolerance amongst those who would call themselves, quote, tolerant, that when an idea offends me as a, quote, tolerant person, I must silence them. I must take away their right to speak because what they're saying is unkind, or it's not nice, or it offends somebody, or, it's not the way. That's not who we are as Americans. Our society is an open society, and I believe very strongly that the tenets of my faith and what I believe as a Christian, those can stand on their own. They don't need the power of government to be able to enforce them. My beliefs are capable. Christ's message is capable of standing on its own 2 feet. Is how I look at it.
But what's the limit? I guess what's the limit? Let's say, for instance, as a Christian, you have a set beliefs. Now you brought up tearing down statues. There's a prominent figure in national conversation who has asked for statues of Jesus Christ to be torn down because he represents a European racial idea that maybe doesn't go well with current culture or just the conversations that are being had at a national level. I'm just going to throw out a theoretical example. Let's say your constituents in your district overwhelmingly start to say that, yes, we should remove statues of Jesus Christ from public places or just visible places. How do you balance what your constituents want with your own faith principles?
That's a good question too, and I think we all have to realize that what we most want in our elected people that serve us is men and women of principles. We want people who are going to do what they say they're going to do and mean what they say. And so I believe very strongly that there comes a point at which you'd have to look at your constituents and just say, look, if this is what you want, I'm not the man for the job. I have no illusions, nor have I ever in any of my political events indicated a willingness to sort of be pliable as Plato and sort of bend to the will of whatever the polling says. I think we all have values. And so when I ran, it was on the idea that, look, what you see is what you get. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to try to transform my message into something that the polling says is popular. I am simply here as an option, and these are my ideas, and this is what I will do and stand for, and there are lines I won't cross. And so what you mentioned, I would just say tearing down statues of a religious figure for any major religion doesn't seem very tolerant to me for a group that seems to be so concerned about tolerance.
Yeah. Imam Walid.
This is an interesting, the example can be a little bit problematic. I can see this another example because for me as a Muslim, I don't believe in the statues. So that's number one. Number two, I don't want our religion, our country, and our city to have a status debate. So I have a Buddha status here, and Jesus status here, Muhammad status here. I don't want also that. But what if it's a, God forbid, I'm in his shoes. I'm a politician, and I have to deal with that. I think the first thing I would say that the beautiful thing in our system that allowed a room of debate. So we can debate that. I think everybody has the freedom to express their point of view. Then in the end of the day, we have a system that we have chosen that will make these ideas to be a reality. And I think following the system is important. And if I see that I'm not the right person for it, and that's something I don't feel like I want to be responsible for whatever reason, I can step away. But like what Representative Tom said, Dr. Tom said it beautifully. And that's very rare to find in politicians today because people, unfortunately, changing their principles, not their parties, or their their political alliance. But I'm happy and I'm glad to hear that. So that's what I would say. I would say that we open this for a debate, for a talk. And I don't specifically the talk today about the Jesus statues. I refuse it because I think it's a made-up issue. It's not an issue. We've been living in America. How many times did you pass by road or the mall and you see a statue of Jesus. It's not real. It's not a real problem. I think it's a made-up problem and blowing out proportion for a bigger issue, which is, in my opinion, can be lead to, I don't want to call it war against religion, but there is a big push in our society today to limit the influence of religion in people. And I'm always proud to be an American for many reasons, but one of it is when I go to Europe and I see the difference between us as a religious society. I don't want us to end up like, what I see in many European cities. I tell my friends, the priests and the rabbi, please make sure that people go to church on Sunday. I'm Muslim. I don't believe. I lost you guys. Okay. I was saying, I'm happy when I see people going to church on Sunday. I'm happy when I see people go to the synagogue on Sunday, because in the end of the day, I believe that's the best interest for our country. I do believe religion, if it's properly practiced, nothing can match it. It's a very powerful tool to make us, to create a coherence, a loving society, a nation that can be unified, and that's my view.
Yeah, and Imam Ali, just the decisions that you have to make at Clear Lake Islamic Center, open, not to open, limit the amount of congregants, especially in light of the surge, limit the amount of congregants, how to disinfect the mosque, procedures for staying in the mosque and leaving the mosque. I'm not saying these are trivial decisions, but when we compare them to decisions that have to be made in governance, at a statewide level, or at a policy or a legislative level, that maybe Tom has to make, or the county judges have to make, or congressional officials have to make. It's just, when you make these decisions, I know the amount of prayer in what we call in Islam, it's called istikhara, where we officially consult, where it's like an official consultation of God. It's, how can you make decisions like this, but when it comes to statewide decisions of governance, which impact hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, how do you not consult God in that? A higher power, especially if you are someone who is faithful. How do you leave God out of the conversation? But how do you say to God, you know what, I've got to make this decision. I've got it. I can make it on my own. Like, how does that happen? And can that happen?
There's two aspects for this for me. If I just want to say quickly, something in regard to your question is that we pray to God. That's what I learned in my religion. Yeah, you pray and you seek guidance, and you basically ask Him, because that shows me also a very important concept, which is I'm weak without Him. I'm incomplete. I'm imperfect, and so I will never be arrogant, because arrogance can blind you and don't see your way. But in the same time, my religion teaches me very clearly that prayer by itself is not enough. I pray to God, but also I have to take every measure. I have to study it. I have to consult. I have to ask. Like if I make a decision in my congregation, if I limit the number of participants, put a mask on before you come to the mosque, it's not because I pray to God and God told me that. No, or not to tell me that. It's because doctors like Dr. Tom and other people told me, you know what? You save life by doing this. This is what science says. I think a lot of people think religion is a very rigid thing, but it's not. It's a very flexible, wide. It gives you that inner strength, but it not necessarily would provide you the tool and the procedures how to do it. That will be left to you to seek it through professional people around you, consulting the people of expertise.
Yeah, and this really leads into our next question. A large majority of Americans feel that religion is losing influence in public life. And according to a 2019 Pew Research Center, and that's according to a 2019 Pew survey. So while some say this is a good thing, that religion is losing influence in public life, many more view it as a negative development, reflecting the broad tendency of Americans to see religion as a positive force in society. Do you feel this trend will continue or decline in Texas?
I think that, we're always, if you look at the if you look at the history of religion in terms of, you know, what I would say sort of generally what we would consider to be people of the book, right? So there's sort of a common history that we share, the three major world religions. And one of the things that we learn along the way through watching the nation, the God's people of Israel and their struggles is that there are always going to be times of disbelief where people will walk away, or people don't see the value of faith. And then there are going to be events and people that will come along that will call people back to faith. So I'm not terribly, you know, scared in the grand canon of things. I'm not terribly scared about the fact that people right now may be saying, well, you know, I don't believe in God, or I don't want to go to church, or I don't see the point of going to mosque, or, you know, I'm losing my faith. I think that that's all in God's control. But I feel very, very strongly that what we cannot allow is for that minority, and I believe it is a minority in this country, to essentially become the tail wagging the dog and telling those of us who practice our religion and our beliefs earnestly, who live in a God-centered universe, that we have to be silent about it, that we're not allowed to speak about our faith, that we're not allowed to live our lives according to a code of living that is what we understand as God honoring. You know, I mean, and I'm sure that in Islam is the same as Christianity, that there are ways of living that are God honoring, and then there are ways of living that are not. You know, it's not right to kill your neighbor and take all his stuff. Just generally, right? I'm sure we could make a list of hundreds of things upon which
that would be a pretty bad thing.
That would be a bad thing for sure. But my point is just that you know, we can't be silent. And I will go one farther and just say that I feel very strongly, and one of the reasons why I think what we're doing today is incredibly important, because I think that Christians and Muslims agree on probably 90% of social conservative policies, ideas, you know, the idea that this universe didn't just randomly come about as a bunch of bits that sort of randomly came together, that there was a purpose and a plan and a creator, and there's a design for us as well as people, as his creation. We've got to stand together, and we've got to push back against those that would say none of that is of value, and in fact, none of you should have the right to say it at all.
Imam Ali?
Unfortunately, I am, I'm worried about the future of religion and faith in general, but I do have trust in God. But what I think the biggest challenge for us as people of faith, that we have to come together. That's just not only, like some of my friends, they talk about, oh, Muslims, you guys converting people to Islam. I said, don't worry about it. Muslim or those who convert to Islam or not. What we really, both of us should be worried about, those who convert to no religion at all, to deny God completely. I'm not worried about somebody to be a Christian. I'm worried about someone who don't believe in God, period. And yes, I do have friends who happen to be atheists, and I know people who don't believe in God, but I don't treat them bad or anything. That's not true. But I'm worried about in a larger scale, this is not something healthy for a society. And that's here with the challenge. I think people of faith have to make their case. Instead of just threatening and making them feel scared and doomed and you go to hell, I think what we need to do, we need to explain to people why religion is good for people, why faith is something powerful, why the lack of faith make us unable to meet the challenges of life. Faith is actually like Martin Luther King, the one who said that faith is taking the first steps, even when you don't see the whole staircase. That argument need to be made. And another thing, the people of faith have to understand that they don't represent themselves only; they represent the faith as well. So when we say, "Hey, I'm Christian or I'm Muslim," then I look at your life. When you hold the Bible up, but everything in your life putting the Bible down, that's not a good message. Gandhi, the famous social reformer, slash politicians. In India, because of the suffering he had with the British colonization, he has a very famous statement. I don't like how general it was made, but this is something we can apply to everybody. He said, I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. And I think I can say that. There's a lot of, I like your Islam, but I don't like Muslims. I like your Quran, but I don't like how many Muslims behave. In another word, it's so important for us if we want that rate of, because most of people, as all these studies shows us, they reject religion not because of theology. Actually, it's because of social issues. There's biggest problem with how we deal with people who have different sexual orientations. How do we deal with people who disagree with us in fundamental things? How do we see our religion versus other people? How do we multiculturalism? So these social issues, if we can be, we can talk about it in the tone of religion, in the tone, the way Jesus and the way Muhammad, the way the prophets and the religion in general speaks about these issues in a very subtle tone, instead of challenging and threatening and preaching. I think we can win. Also, it is so important for us to defend our constitutions, because our constitutions, in my opinion, protect religion. The freedom of religion is something that we should protect. That's why I remember about 15 years ago, when I used to organize an event here in Houston called Texas Dawah Convention, we had a very big sessions about the concept of freedom of religion and how important. That's 15 or 18 years ago, and it was a conversation that took place between several religious leaders and politicians as well. So I do believe that it's something that we have to protect, to keep it in our system. And also as preachers, as people, we need to appeal to the young crowd, to know how to appeal to them, talk to them using the tools in the media that is available for us today to reach out to them and to convince them that religion is something important in life and it's not something bad.
Yeah, I agree with what Imam Walid just said. I do think that it's important that we continue, and I should have said this, so I need to kind of correct it. I'm not trying to say that I don't think that we have the responsibility as people of faith to be out there trying to reach those that have no faith. Believe that, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian, I think God calls upon us to spread that message and to give people hope and to give people a better way of living, right? I mean, in my scriptures, it talks about in one verse about those that are lost being held captive. They're captives to a way of thinking and a way of living that they're doing what they know to do, right? And so it's up to us to come into the picture and offer a better way. And Imam Walid, I don't know if you'd agree with me on that, but I do think it is our prime directive as people of faith to go out and offer a better way of living. And it has to be conversion by attraction, right? I mean, I think what you said loud and clear that I completely agree with is there are many bad examples of people who identify with one religion or another who do not live a life that is God honoring in any way, shape, or form. Now, I would say we're all broken people and we all make mistakes, but truly, I think one of the best ways that you can model that God honoring lifestyle is through your own actions. It's difficult to be talking about love on one hand and beating somebody over the head with the other hand, right? I mean, it just that does not compute. And you don't have to be a religious scholar to see that that's hypocritical.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is really different about the conversation today is that since the inception of this country, faith has never had to be defended, meaning it's just been a part and parcel of the conversation. It's been a part and parcel of the socioeconomic values of our country. But it's probably in the last 20 to 30 years where we almost have to defend faith, but say why we're utilizing faith as a resource for the decisions that we make. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's also because of the direction that our culture is going in, where we're becoming, as a country, we're becoming more agnostic. And from my perspective as a Muslim, that's pretty unfortunate. As Imam Walid said, it's not that you're Christian or you're Jewish or you're Muslim; it's that you actually believe in God, and that's something that we really care about. What are your thoughts on the direction of culture and how that plays a role in the decisions that you have to make?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What are your thoughts on culture, on modern culture, and how it changes, and whether it be of social values or family values or economic values, and how does that impact the decisions that you make?
Well, I mean, again, I think it kind of gets back to what I said earlier, which is that my way of looking at things, I believe is the right way to look at things. Is I look at it through the lens of I live in a God-centered universe, and I answer to a higher power, and so I follow His lead. And so a lot of these issues, I mean, economics and things like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there definitely are. There is sort of a God honoring perspective on many of these issues in a way that, this is sort of how it is, kind of thing. On the social issues are tough. Look, I would tell you that I think that it is sometimes difficult for a person who is a strong believer, whether and I'm just speaking for myself as a Christian. There are places that the Bible is very clear about. These are things that are just not God honoring ways to live, and I'm not here to forcibly tell people how they can and can't live their lives. But if you're asking me, do I think that's a lifestyle that leads to heaven? I would tell you it's not. And there has to be some sort of a middle ground there where we're able to, not unnecessarily ruin people's lives, but at the same time, we have to have the ability to be a group of faith-based people that are calling out behaviors that we think are inherently unbiblical or inherently, inconsistent with the teachings of the Quran. And I'm sure, I'm not an expert, but I'm sure Imam Walid, you would agree that there are certain things the Quran is very clear about, just as the Bible. And so there are bridges you just can't cross if you're a person of faith.
And in terms of current events, you see, we have a lot of social unrest, and we keep seeing videos day after day of our brothers and sisters in the Black community. They're not necessarily treated the same way as other minorities are, or as other people are by law enforcement, by health departments, education departments, and we see more and more coming out. But not just when it comes to racial unrest or social unrest, but then we also see what's happening with our friends at the border. We see what's happening in not just in communities of color, but all communities when it comes to healthcare and access to healthcare or equal education. What role does faith play? What role does, and specifically as you as a Christian, what role does the Bible play? What role does Jesus Christ play when it comes to making decisions governing aspects such as these?
Well, I think, and very, really right now, you mentioned the things that are going on with some of the, the racial injustices that we see, and I'm going to call them what they are. I mean, I think they're injustices. And, I love the fact that when you go back to the movement to abolish slavery in America in the mid 1800s, the people that were driving that were really sort of the heart and soul behind that, were Protestant ministers that were pushing incredibly hard, not just in America, but in England as well, just saying, look, this is not, we claim to be Christ followers, and yet we're not living according to those teachings. And this ugly stain that is slavery, that is on our nation's, that is legal in our nation, it has to go. I mean, and so credit to people for actually recognizing that and being willing to sort of break with the social norm of the day and just say, this is unrighteous, this is wrong. and we're going to put a stop to it. I think we are always on a quest to try to live a life that is more God-honoring today than it was yesterday, and I think that's true for people as well as nations.
Imam Walid.
First of all, I would like to say that there is, those things are clear in our religion, that this is right and this is wrong, and this is, not acceptable religiously. And I think we should have the freedom to express what our belief is, and in regard to some of the social issues today. And I think some of the examples that you mentioned are kind of mixed. So I have a different, I differentiate between, for example, when we talk about LGBTQ community, I can say this as a religious leader, maybe politicians don't speak much about it, but openly. But for me, I very clear to me in my head, in my religion, that I cannot tolerate, regardless of what religiously my position is. I think we all can agree that we cannot tolerate any form of bullying, any bit of discriminations, any form of, not treated equally to any other human being just because of their sexual orientation. I do believe that, and I do believe that my religion basically motivates me to respect that human beings as a human being. Even if I do believe that he committed sin. What I don't like about this conversation, that in the other side of the aisle, unfortunately, some of our friends not even allowing us to say that this is something morally I don't accept, or religiously I don't accept, or something I don't want to be promoting. Even my opinion, I'm not allowed to express it. And if I'm a politician, I'll be prosecuted and publicly, and will be attacked left and right. And we became so angry. Why? I mean, I'm just saying my opinion, but I understand the fear for my opinion to let me legislate something to abuse you. But I do believe that we have a strong system, and we should have a strong system, we don't, that protect the rights of every human being from being violated. But also part of my rights is to express my opinion. It's just an opinion, and I should have the ability to debate that publicly, to say why I don't agree with this lifestyle versus that lifestyle. Period. That's it. And there is hundreds of thousands of examples like this we do every day. The other issue is the issue of, unfortunately, the social and racial, separation that we live today in our society, and the way it is. Obviously, this is has a lot of history in it, and I do believe when America took that decision to end slavery and to legislate rules to end slavery, did not take rules and steps as well to heal that gap and to bring the two communities together. It's 100 years ago or so. We did not take that. Unfortunately, we ended it legally, but we did not end it in a social practice. So we still had a lot of things practiced after the end of slavery that is still, it's a social, racial injustice and separation between black and white and all the things that we know about. But also, it is not fair and it's not right is to say that America today, even in this matter, is staying the same way it was 100 years ago or 50 or 70 years ago. That's not true, and it's not correct. As we see, we are progressing. Yes, we would like this to progress more. Yes, I agree with that. But it will be a foolish thing that we destroy what we have. I think the smart thing is to build on what we have, to build on the progress that we have. We have to admit that we need to improve, and we have to be sincere about that, and we all collectively work together to build that. That's what my common sense told me. We have to live that also, multicultural life that we talk about. I can't expect to build a multicultural masjid or center or a church if I'm not living a multicultural life. We have to live that in order for us to promote it. And that's why I think it is so important for us to elect those who believe in this, who will heal the society, who will bring us together, not to divide us apart.
That's right. And some of these social and cultural issues are common sense. Xenophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, these are not right or left issues. These are human issues. And it's something that we must all work together on both sides of the aisle, or any side of the aisle. We have to work on eradicating this from our communities overall.
Shai, I just want to say, once told my community, said, you know what, sometimes I'm sick and tired of being left and right. You know, what I would like to see is right or wrong. Well, that's just right. It's just because it's right. That's why, because that's wrong, I don't believe in it. Just not because it's a right idea or a left idea. I think what is right, and what is wrong is wrong.
And I want to end it on this one last question. What challenges do you expect for Texans in the future, Dr. Oliverson, and in terms of religious freedom in our very dynamic socio-political landscape?
That's a great question, Sharik. And I think, again, we've been talking about this a lot, but there is a growing intolerance, I think, in terms of an unwillingness to allow people the space to be able to express religious ideas and sentiments. And again, we've talked about this, but part of it is our own fault. There's a saying in my church, that love and truth must go together. We must say the truth in love, and we must show love, that's contains the truth. In other words, we can't take the truth out and just be all about love, but we can't be, the cold hard facts and beat people over the head either. And I think that's a challenge for traditionally for a lot of religious people, and it may have fueled some of the pushback that we're seeing right now. But we are at a point, I believe, very strongly in our society where, there is a growing desire to limit the free speech rights of religious people. You saw a very prominent figure who was running for in fact, Sharik, you and I talked about running for president, a Democrat here in Texas, who basically said that, if a church or any religious entity does not support and endorse gay marriage, we're taking away your tax exempt status. Well, that's anti-religious freedom. I mean, to not allow people the freedom to express religious beliefs, that's not what our country was founded upon. And so I think, the tide has been sort of growing in that direction. I think we will all need to pull together as people people who follow God, and people who are concerned about more than just this life, right? That are concerned about what the way they live their life and how they live their life is honoring to God, and what happens in the hereafter. We're going to have to pull together and push back and just say, look, enough of this. First Amendment says we have the right to gather. We have the right to say these things. We have the right to believe what we want to believe. And we have the right to go out to the public square and tell people about it. You can't silence us. You can't tell us what we can and can't believe. And so I do think that that's going to be a growing thing that we're going to all need to pull together and work together on in order to preserve our collective right to practice our faith.
Right. Imam Walid.
I just want to say that sometimes issues can be a little bit more complicated. Like, for example, yes, I do believe religiously I don't conduct a marriage for same-sex marriages, which I don't believe religiously it is allowed in my religion. But at the same time, I think we all should agree that we should not prevent those who believe in that and want to practice that to have the right to do that. Like, if they have their own church, they have their own, way inside the society to have that space for them to have it. I don't believe in abortion with certain conditions in Islamic ruling. There is an interesting debate among Muslims about when abortion is allowed or not allowed, and I'm pushing here hot buttons. But also, I do believe that it is not supposed to be my right to prevent somebody who chooses not to follow my religious opinions about this issue. And here was the challenge. Would you legislate something to limit the freedom because of my religious convictions? So because if we start taking that route, in the end of the day, I do have set of rules in my religion and my version of Christianity versus that version of Christianity versus Jews versus, it's going to clash. I think that's our country is so smart the way it was put to accommodate these diversity. And in the end of the day, like, government should be not a religion or a specific religious, but it's an irreligious society or government. Recognize religion, but not one specific religion, as has been said. I think understand this concept will bring rest to both sides, so we don't need to clash with each other's as people who are on the left or the right. If we agree into this, say just as a final point for me, it is just. I'm happy today that I'm speaking to someone who have principle, because and I will say it with full love and compassion for everybody in the political field. I know that there are so many men of principle in both parties, in both sides of the aisles. But what I would like to see more of these principle in the parties themselves that are leading us politically today. It is very sad, the change and sometimes the hypocritical positions that we see taken by people and as parties in general. And I feel bad because I know a lot of good people who are part of our political system. You know, I really love to see our politicians. And I want to say this as one person who represents a good number of our community here in Houston, Texas, that we're a principled community. We're tired of just being like left or right or Republican versus Democrat. You know what? We're tired of politicians just thinking about the next elections. What we really want to think about the next generation, you know, and that became like our goal, and that's what we're aiming for. And I hope this conversation will make us to meet more, talk more, because in the end of the day, we are on the same boat. We want to make sure that we leave America better than what we have received it.
That's beautiful. And in a growing environment of multicultural and multi-faith diversity, it's going to become more and more challenging for our representatives, such as Dr. Oliverson and others, to represent us. But what that means is just more conversations, is keeping their ears to the ground, keeping their finger on the pulse, making sure they have a broad understanding of not just the political issues at stake or the larger game board, but also what their constituents are saying, what their constituents are feeling. And we truly appreciate Dr. Oliverson taking the time out of his day in the midst of a pandemic, he himself being a physician, in the midst of some very complicated issues that are happening in Austin, to speak with us today about politics and faith. And, you know, Dr. Oliverson, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It must not be easy to make all of these decisions. And the only way that I believe that you can make these decisions is you have to have the assistance of God. You have to pray, you have to have faith, and you have to reach out to him and depend on him. Because at the end of it, you're going to make decisions which are going to upset a section of people or make a section of people happy. And then sometimes it's vice versa, depending upon what decision you make. But the only person or the only being that you can look to is God, to make sure that you're always trying to make him happy and doing right by his word and by his teachings. Thank you again, Dr. Oliverson. I know Imam Walid is still there. He's experiencing some technical difficulties. But again, my name is Sharik Abdul Ghani. I'm the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement for the Muslim community. Blessings to you all, and have a good rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you.